Welcome to Reddit's For Sleep, where every story is your escape into calm. If this video helps you relax or drift off tonight, gently tap that like button so we can keep making more just like this. And if you haven't already, subscribe and let us tuck you in with a fresh hour of stories every single night. Story 1. The dinner that ended a 14-year friendship. 14 years. That's how long I've known Claire. Since freshman year of college, we'd been inseparable roommates, road trip partners, emergency contacts, godparents to each other's pets. If you looked at any chapter of my adult life, Claire was in it, and I always thought I'd be in hers. But 2 weeks ago, that changed over a quiet dinner in a rustic Italian restaurant we used to love. It wasn't explosive. There were no tears, no yelling, just the sound of a fork softly hitting a porcelain plate and the kind of silence that feels like frost on your chest. Let me backtrack a little. Claire and I met at a university in upstate New York, bonding over a mutual hatred of cafeteria food and an obsession with The Office. She was sarcastic, brilliant, and always the center of attention in a way that didn't feel performative, more like a gravitational pull. People naturally orbited around her. I was quieter, more of a listener than a talker. But with Claire, I felt heard. After college, we moved into a shared apartment in Brooklyn, the kind where the walls were too thin and the radiators banged like haunted drums at night, but we loved it. Saturday mornings meant pancakes and reruns of Chopped. Claire would drink black coffee like it was a lifeline. I added enough cream to make mine beige. We were opposites, but in that effortless, balanced way. Life kept evolving. Jobs, relationships, moves, family stuff. Through all of it, we stayed close. I watched Claire fall in love, get engaged, and eventually marry a guy named Daniel, a tall, quiet graphic designer with kind eyes. I was her maid of honor. She was there when my dad passed away and held my hand through the entire funeral. But over the past 2 years, something started to shift. It was subtle at first. Canceled plans, delayed responses to texts, a strange, clipped tone in her voice during phone calls. I brushed it off. People get busy, life happens. But it kept happening, and I noticed something deeper, a kind of growing resentment, like my presence annoyed her. At first, I thought I was imagining it. Then came the first real gut punch, my birthday last year. She forgot. No text, no call, not even a belated oops. Claire had never forgotten before. I ended up eating Chinese takeout alone and rewatching Chef's Table to numb the sting. Then came the job news. I landed a position at a mid-sized architecture firm in Chicago, my dream role, working remotely with some in-person projects. When I told Claire, she sounded disappointed, not in a I'll miss you kind of way, more like, oh, so you're leaving me behind? It was strange, but still, I tried. I flew back often, checked in, asked about her life, listened when she complained about Daniel leaving dishes in the sink or how she hated her manager at the design firm. But my wins? She barely acknowledged them. Then, 2 weeks ago, I was back in Brooklyn for a project meeting and texted her. Dinner? My treat? Lupo's? She said yes. I was hopeful. Lupo's was a favorite of ours in Williamsburg. Warm lighting, wooden tables, the smell of fresh rosemary in the air. When she arrived, she hugged me like we were strangers. Quick, stiff. We ordered wine. Talked about the weather, the city, her work, my project. Everything was polite, distant. Then I said, carefully, "Hey, is everything okay between us? I've felt some space lately. Just wanted to check in." She sighed, took a sip of her Chianti. Then she said, "Honestly, I think we've grown apart." Just like that. No anger, no apology, just finality. She kept talking about how her life had changed, how she'd started to feel like we weren't on the same wavelength anymore, how her priorities had shifted, how she didn't feel the same connection. that she didn't want to keep pretending. It was like sitting across from a stranger who looked like someone I loved. I nodded, tried to keep breathing, tried to stop the heat from rising behind my eyes. We paid. I walked her to the corner where she could catch a cab. She hugged me again, short, robotic, and said, "Take care, okay?" I haven't heard from her since. The thing is, I'm not angry, not even really hurt in the way I expected to be. Just hollow. 14 years. And it ended over a $24 bowl of pasta and a half-empty bottle of wine. I went back to my hotel and stared at the ceiling for hours, wondering if this is just what adult friendship is. People grow. Life splits timelines. Sometimes the person you've held on to is walking a different road now. And no matter how much you reach for them, they won't turn around. So I let Claire go, quietly, lovingly, like placing a memory in a box and putting it on the highest shelf. Still there, still precious, but no longer part of my everyday. I'm learning now that not all endings have to be loud. Some are soft, and they still change everything. Story 2. He left me because I was tired. I didn't cheat, I didn't scream or lie or break trust. I was just tired. That's what ended my marriage. I met James when I was 27 and juggling 2 part-time jobs to pay off grad school debt. He was working in finance, already stable, confident in that clean-shaven, buttoned-up way. He'd bring me little things, protein bars, when I skipped lunch, my favorite chai tea, a backup phone charger when mine broke. It was easy, soft, in the beginning. We fell in love in a way that felt like exhaling after holding your breath for too long. By 30, we were married. Small ceremony in Asheville. My dad walked me down the aisle, still recovering from chemo, and I remember thinking, this is it. This is safe. I didn't need a whirlwind. I needed peace. And James gave me that for a while. We bought a house in Raleigh, beige siding, white shutters, a porch swing we never used. I taught English at a local community college, and James commuted into the city. Life blurred into a routine of shared calendars, grocery runs, and weekend brunch with friends who also wore wedding bands and talked about mortgage rates. The love didn't disappear. It just dulled. I noticed it the first time James came home late, and I didn't ask where he'd been, not because I didn't care, but because I was so tired. Not just physically, but bone-deep tired. The kind of exhaustion that wraps itself around you like a weighted blanket you can't shrug off. I was still grading papers at 10 p.m. Most nights, I volunteered on weekends. My mom's arthritis flared up, and I drove her to appointments twice a week. There was always something. James would look at me across the dinner table and ask, "Why don't we take a weekend trip?" And I'd say, "Maybe next month." He'd suggest trying that new sushi place, and I'd offer to order in instead. I could see the frustration bloom behind his eyes, but he rarely said anything directly. James wasn't the confrontational type. He retreated instead. Stayed longer at work, started going to the gym again, which was great, except he never invited me. Our conversations shrank to weather updates and what do we need from Costco. It all felt like slow motion drowning. You're not thrashing, not making a scene, just slowly sinking while everyone around you keeps moving. I remember one night, I was folding laundry in the living room alone, again, and I just started crying, for no reason. Or maybe for every reason. The socks in my hands, the empty couch cushion beside me, the way the clock ticked louder than usual. I sat on the floor and cried quietly until it passed. I didn't tell James. I didn't want to burden him. I thought I was just going through a rough patch. A season. Surely it would lift. But seasons don't always pass. Sometimes they harden. 3 months ago, James sat me down at the kitchen table. He had that look, the kind he got when he was about to talk numbers or refinance options. I braced myself. Instead, he said, "I think I need to leave." It didn't register. I thought he meant leave the house, leave for work. I laughed a little and said, "Okay, but it's raining. Maybe wait an hour." He didn't laugh, just stared at his hands. Then he said it again. "I think we need to separate." I remember the hum of the fridge, the way the light flickered above the sink, the ache in my stomach that had nothing to do with hunger. He said he felt alone, that I'd stopped showing up emotionally, that he couldn't remember the last time I touched him just to be close, that everything we did felt mechanical, cold. I wanted to scream, "Yes, that's what life has been. That's what I've been carrying too." But I just sat there because I was too tired to fight. We didn't have a messy breakup. We divided things up like we were splitting a bill. He moved out a month later into a downtown condo, left behind a hoodie, 2 mugs I'd bought in Charleston, and the painting from our hallway. I didn't stop him. People keep asking, "What happened? You two looked so happy." I don't know how to explain it. That sometimes people don't leave because of betrayal. Sometimes they leave because the weight of everyday life becomes too heavy. And no one says it out loud. No one asks for help. No one pauses to say, "Hey, I see you drowning." I'm not angry at James. I think he did what he thought he needed. And maybe he was right. Maybe we did lose something essential. Not just the spark, but the glue. But I still think about how easily it unraveled. Sometimes, all it takes to break something sacred is silence. The kind that builds up in small, quiet rooms. The kind that grows when you stop reaching across the couch. When you stop saying, "I miss you," even when you're sitting in the same room. I've started going to therapy. I'm trying to figure out where I lost myself. I've picked up hiking again, something I used to love before the fog rolled in. My mom and I planted lavender in the backyard last weekend. It smells like breathing again. I still sleep on one side of the bed. I still pour 2 cups of coffee out of habit. And every now and then I still check his Instagram, not to see if he's with someone new, but just to see if he looks happy. He does. And that's okay. I want him to be okay. I want me to be okay too, even if I had to break open to start healing. Maybe that's what this was. Not the end of a marriage. Just the beginning of remembering who I am when I'm not holding everything together with tired hands. Story 3. The HOA president tried to ruin me, so I gave her exactly what she deserved. I never thought I'd become the kind of person who fantasizes about getting revenge. I've always been keep the peace type, the guy who waves at neighbors, even if they never wave back, who returns shopping carts, who bakes banana bread when someone down the street has a baby or a bad day. But after what Carol did, I changed. Carol was the HOA president of our little suburban neighborhood in a cul-de-sac just outside Richmond, Virginia. I moved here with my wife 4 years ago. We picked this neighborhood because it was quiet, family-friendly, and supposedly well-managed. It seemed safe. Carol introduced herself the day we moved in. She handed us a thick HOA rulebook and a store-bought tray of cookies. Her smile was tight, her blazer a little too crisp for a Saturday afternoon. She had that clipped, polite way of speaking like every word was rehearsed. I should have known. The first year was fine. We landscaped the yard, planted some dogwoods, kept our trash cans tucked away per regulation. I even went to a few HOA meetings, mostly listening while Carol dominated the floor. She loved rules, adored them even. Enforcement was her hobby. Things shifted after my wife, Marissa, got pregnant. It started with a letter, a formal notice taped to our door about the color of our front door being 2 shades outside the approved neutral palette. I thought it was a joke. It wasn't. Carol sent a follow-up email with swatches attached. Then came a complaint about our mailbox. Apparently, it was leaning 5 degrees to the left. I measured. It was 3. But I replaced the post anyway because we had bigger things to worry about. Doctor appointments, nursery prep, sleep. After our daughter was born, the real war began. One evening, around 7 p.m., I wheeled our trash bin out to the curb. Collection wasn't until morning, but I figured with a newborn, better to do it now than forget later. By 8 p.m., there was another notice on my door. Bins may not be placed before 7 a.m. on pickup day. Violation #3, fines escalating. I emailed Carol politely, explained our situation, even attached a picture of our newborn sleeping in my arms. No response. Instead, the fines kept coming. Over grass height, a single weed, a wind chime, she said, created an auditory nuisance. Our backyard was fenced in. I couldn't even hear it from the kitchen. Marissa told me to let it go. It's not worth it, she said. And for a while, I did, until the spring barbecue. Every May, our block does a little neighborhood gathering in the cul-de-sac, potluck style, kids running around. It's nice. I'd helped organize the last 2 years. But this time, Carol accidentally sent the invites out without including us. When I emailed to ask if we could still contribute, she replied, "This event is intended for residents in good standing with the HOA." We'd paid every fine, on time. No one else had even come close to our record of compliance. But somehow, we weren't in good standing. I saw red. I stayed up that night, rereading the HOA charter, every page, every clause. I made notes, cross-referenced line items, and what I found was gold. Turns out, Carol had never legally filed the HOA's annual financial disclosures with the county, a requirement under Virginia state law. The HOA technically wasn't in good standing with the state, which meant any enforcement, any fines, any actions taken, potentially invalid. I double-checked with a lawyer friend of mine who owed me a favor. He confirmed it. "If you want to make a stink, you've got cause," he said. So I made a stink, but not the kind she expected. Instead of confronting Carol directly, I contacted 5 other neighbors who'd complained quietly over the years but were afraid to speak up. Together, we drafted a formal petition to audit the HOA. We kept it quiet. No front yard whispers, no gossip. We gathered signatures, sent a certified letter to the county clerk, and within weeks, an investigation was opened into the HOA's finances. Turns out, Carol had also been paying herself a monthly stipend, unauthorized by the board. It wasn't massive, but over the course of 4 years, it added up. Thousands of dollars. She tried to claim it was for administrative costs, but there were no receipts, no votes, no transparency. The county stepped in. Carol was removed as HOA president by a mandatory vote. The board was dissolved and restructured. All past fines were reviewed, and about 70% were reversed, including every single one we'd paid. But the cherry on top? Carol's husband, who I'd always suspected didn't care for the HOA drama, quietly listed their house for sale 2 weeks later. They moved by summer. The new HOA president? A kind woman named Teresa, who teaches elementary school and thinks wind chimes are peaceful. I still keep the notice about the mailbox just for laughs. Sometimes I take it out and remember that even quiet people can make noise when it matters. Sometimes revenge doesn't come with fire or fury. Sometimes it comes with a clipboard, a few neighbors, and the truth. Story 4. My mom wasn't invited to my wedding, and I didn't regret it. I got married last fall in a small town in Vermont. Just 43 people, close friends, a few coworkers, my partner's family, and mine, or rather, part of mine. Because my mother wasn't there. There was no invitation, no phone call, no dress picked out, no mother of the bride speech. And I didn't regret it, not then, not even now. But to understand why, you'd have to understand the kind of mother she was. My mom was never outright cruel. That's what made it confusing growing up. She wasn't the kind of mom you see on Lifetime movies. No fists or police reports or broken glass. She was subtle, passive-aggressive, controlling in the way that makes you question whether you're the problem. From the outside, we looked like a typical suburban family in Connecticut. Dad worked long hours in IT, and Mom stayed home. Our house always smelled like cinnamon and fabric softener, but underneath all that comfort was a slow drip of conditional love. When I brought home a B+ in 8th grade, she didn't scold me. She sighed, smiled tightly, and said, "Well, maybe college just won't be your thing." When I made the school play, she said, "You're brave for doing that with your body type." When I got my first boyfriend at 17, she said, "He must not mind a bit of attitude." Death by 1,000 compliments. She always compared me to my cousin Lily, tall, polite, Ivy League bound. At Christmas, she'd ask Lily to play piano while I cleared dishes. When I got into a solid public university with a small scholarship, she congratulated me, then reminded me that Lily had a full ride to Dartmouth. It wasn't just about achievements, it was about control. In college, I dyed my hair dark red. She showed up on campus one weekend and said, "Oh, that's a bold choice. Makes your skin look sallow." I changed it back by winter break. All right. I started therapy in my mid-20s when I realized how often I second-guessed every decision I made, what to wear, what to eat, who to date. My therapist, a woman named June, helped me see the patterns. That I'd been trained to please, to minimize myself, to expect disapproval. The hardest part was accepting that someone can love you and still hurt you deeply. When I met Jordan, everything changed. He was calm, steady. He listened. He asked questions no one had asked me before. "Do you like that? Or are you just used to it? What do you want?" It was like someone opened a window after years of stale air. We got engaged after 2 years. When we started planning the wedding, I felt this slow, rising panic. I could already hear my mom's comments. "Isn't that dress a little too much for your figure? Do you really want your hair up? Why waste money on a fall wedding? Everything looks dead." I brought it up in therapy. I cried harder than I had in years. And June asked me gently, "Do you want her there?" I sat in silence for a long time before whispering, "No, I really don't." So I didn't invite her. I sent a long letter, not angry, not cruel, just honest. I told her how I felt, what I needed. That this day was about love and peace, not walking on eggshells. That I wish things had been different. But I couldn't keep offering parts of myself to someone who only loved the version of me she'd invented. She never replied. My dad came. He's quiet, sweet, a little weathered by the years. He held my hand before I walked down the aisle and whispered, "You're doing the right thing." That meant everything. The wedding was quiet, golden, filled with laughter that didn't feel strained, no tension in the air. Just joy. I wore the dress I wanted. My hair was up. The flowers were deep burgundy and rust. Nothing about it was perfect. The cake leaned a little. Someone's speech ran too long, but it was mine. Afterward, a few family members pulled me aside and said, "I know it must have been hard not having your mom here." I nodded, but truthfully, it wasn't. It was harder living under the weight of her expectations than it was standing free on my own. I don't know what our future holds. Maybe someday we'll talk again. Maybe she'll change. Maybe she won't. But what I do know is this: your peace is worth protecting, even from the people who raised you, especially from them. You don't have to burn bridges, but you can choose to stop walking across them if every step hurts. I chose to stay on solid ground. And for the first time in my life, I didn't look back. Story 5. The day I stopped being the family therapist. I didn't go to school for psychology. I don't have a degree in counseling. But for most of my life, I've been the therapist of my family. I'm 38 now, married, no kids, living just outside Portland, Oregon. I work in UX design, quiet job, lots of thinking, not a lot of chaos. And maybe that's why I've always been the one people turn to when things fall apart. I listen well. I don't interrupt. I let people feel what they need to feel. But eventually, even listeners get tired. It started with my older brother, Kevin. He's 5 years older, divorced twice, 3 kids, one of whom has special needs. He calls me almost every week, not to ask how I'm doing, but to vent. About his ex, about his bills, about how he just can't catch a break. He never asks about my life, never pauses to breathe. Just a verbal dump every time. Then there's my mom. She's 64, retired early, spends most days watching cable news and spiraling. She'll call me crying about how the world is ending, how her knees hurt, how her sister won't call her back. I sit there, phone pressed to my ear, gently talking her down, over and over. When I mention I've had a long day, or that I'm dealing with a deadline, she says, "Well, I guess you're just too busy for your mother now." There's my cousin Rachel, who spiraled into a bad relationship last year and calls me every time they fight. She's cried to me in the middle of the night. I've Venmo'd her money for rent. I've edited her resume. I've sent her meditation podcasts and therapists' numbers she never uses. It's not that I don't care. I do. That's the problem. Somehow, I became the default, the stable one, the safe space. I became the one who could handle it, the one who'd never yell, never guilt trip, never ask for anything in return. But lately, I've been tired. I noticed it during a work call a few weeks ago. My manager asked me a simple question, something about an interface bug, and I just stared at the screen. My heart was racing, my chest was tight. I had this urge to just turn everything off, crawl under the desk, disappear. I took a walk after the call, clouds rolling in, wind picking up, the kind of gray Portland afternoon that makes you feel like the whole world's exhaling. And I realized no one ever asks how I'm doing. Not really. I thought back to my birthday last month. I turned 38. I got a card from Kevin's kids. My mom forgot. Rachel sent me a voice memo asking if I thought her boyfriend was cheating. No one said, "How do you feel about 38?" Or, "What do you want this year?" I spent the day eating leftover Indian food and watching documentaries about train stations. And honestly, the silence felt better than the noise I'd gotten used to. The breaking point came 2 Saturdays ago. I had planned a rare self-care day. No calls, no emails. Just a slow morning, a walk in the Forest Park trails, and dinner at my favorite ramen spot. At 8:41 a.m., my phone rang. It was Kevin. I didn't pick up. 5 minutes later, my mom called. I ignored it. Then Rachel texted, "Are you up? I need to talk. Bad night." I stared at the screen for a full minute, and then I turned my phone off. I didn't explain. I didn't apologize. I just let the world go quiet. That was the first day in years I didn't talk to anyone in my family. I hiked for hours. The air was crisp, the trees humming. I had lunch on a mossy rock, sipping tea from a thermos. I didn't feel guilt. I felt something softer, quieter, like permission. That night, when I turned my phone back on, I had 12 missed calls, 6 voicemails, multiple texts. Some angry, some worried. My mom said she thought something had happened. Kevin said I was being dramatic. Rachel said, "I guess I can't count on anyone." I didn't reply that night. Instead, the next day, I wrote an email. Not emotional, not defensive, just honest. I told them all that I loved them, that I'd always be here in an emergency. but that I couldn't keep carrying everyone's emotional weight like it was my job, that I wasn't a therapist, that I needed space, and that if they wanted a real relationship, not just a hotline, I'd be ready for that. Only Rachel replied. She said she understood, that she was sorry, that maybe she needed therapy after all. Kevin hasn't responded. My mom left a voicemail that said, "I guess you're done with us now." But I'm not. I'm just done being their lifeboat while I drown. I spent so many years believing that love meant availability, that if I didn't pick up, if I didn't fix it, I was being cold, uncaring. But I've learned this. Love without boundaries is not love. It's performance. It's sacrifice. It's slow erosion. I still love them, but I also love myself now. And sometimes that love looks like silence, like turning off the phone, like walking in the woods and letting the noise fall away. Sometimes peace comes, not from fixing what's broken, but from stepping away, softly, before you break too. Story 6. The man who cut my father's grass for 22 years. I buried my dad last November. Lung cancer. Stage 4. It came fast, diagnosed in May, gone by the first frost. He was 73. Quiet, punctual. A retired postal worker who wore white socks with sandals and could fix anything with duct tape and leftover screws from other projects. My mom passed in 2019. After that, Dad mostly kept to himself, lived in the same split-level house in Columbus, Ohio. On the same block he'd been on since the 80s. Every Monday morning, he'd roll out his trash cans by 6:30. Every Saturday, he'd mow the lawn lines so straight you could measure them. When the cancer spread and the treatments began, he tried to keep his routine. But eventually, the yard got too long, and the bins stayed tucked behind the gate. That was the first sign, I think, that he was surrendering to it. Then, one afternoon, in late July, I pulled into his driveway and saw a man pushing a lawnmower across the yard. I didn't recognize him. Mid-40s, tall, work boots, mowing like it was his own grass. I got out of my car, a little alarmed. I asked, "Can I help you?" He turned the engine off, wiped his forehead. "Sorry, didn't mean to scare you. I've been mowing this lawn for a while." I blinked. "For a while?" He nodded. "Since 01. Your dad never told you?" He hadn't. We sat on the porch that day and talked. His name was Roy. He lived 4 doors down Blue House, pickup truck, 2 teenage sons. He said my dad helped him fix a leaking pipe when he moved in 22 years ago. They didn't talk much after that, just neighborly waves, occasional tool borrowing. One summer, Roy's mower broke, and my dad let him borrow his. Then offered to help mow the backyard, since it was small. The next weekend, my dad mowed both lawns, Roy's and his. The next weekend, Roy mowed both. And somehow, without ever talking about it, they just kept doing it. For 22 years, they alternated. Rain or shine, one would mow for the other. No schedule, no text. Just a silent agreement between 2 quiet men who didn't need words. When Dad got sick, Roy noticed the lawn growing out of sync, so he just kept mowing, every week. He wouldn't have wanted anyone else doing it, Roy said, eyes soft, so I made sure it got done. I didn't cry right then, but later that night, I stood in my dad's backyard looking at the fresh-cut grass, and I wept like a child. In a world where relationships often get measured by likes, tags, calls, and grand gestures, my father's most enduring friendship was wordless. It was built on sweat, gasoline, and blades of grass. At the funeral, I told that story. Roy sat in the 3rd row, hat in hand, staring at the floor. When I spoke his name, he looked up, surprised. After the service, he came to me and said, "Your dad was a good man." I nodded, "So are you." After we buried Dad, I took over the house. My wife and I aren't sure what we'll do with it yet. Rent it maybe, sell it. But the grass still grows. Last Saturday morning, I woke up to the sound of a lawnmower. I looked out the window. Roy, pushing it along the side of the house, just like always. This time I walked outside. I waved him down. "You want a break?" I asked. He smiled, handed me the handle. Figured it was your turn anyway. I think we both understood what he meant. Sometimes love doesn't need to be loud. Sometimes the most faithful relationships aren't built through conversation, but through consistency, a lawn mowed, a pipe fixed, a neighbor who shows up. Every other Saturday now. I walk down to Roy's house. No need to knock. I just grab the mower from his shed. I do his lawn, then mine. 22 years. That's how long it takes to write a story like this. But the lessons? They last longer. Story 7. He was my barista for 11 years, and then one day, he was gone. There's a coffee shop on 3rd and Hemlock, just across from the train station. A tiny place, barely room for 8 people inside, with a window counter, 3 bar stools, and the smell of roasted beans that clings to your coat for hours. I've been going there for over a decade, almost every weekday morning since I started working in Midtown Manhattan. The shop opens at 6:15 a.m. I usually walk in by 6:25. Sometimes earlier in winter when it's still dark. And for the last 11 years, my order was always the same. 1 12 ounces, drip, splash of oat milk, no sugar. And for the last 11 years, the man behind the counter, his name was Sam, would hand me that coffee before I even asked. He was maybe mid-50s, black beard flecked with gray. Always wore a green beanie, no matter the season. Not loud, not pushy, but warm in that rare, solid way that makes you feel seen without needing to perform. At some point in those 11 years, he learned my name. I never told him. He must have seen it on a credit card once. After that, he always greeted me with, "Morning, Chris." I tried to return the favor. I learned his name from the little tag pinned to his apron. "Hey, Sam," I'd say. "Busy morning." Sometimes he'd nod. Sometimes he'd say, "This is nothing. You should have seen 2014. Snowstorm shut down half the block, and we still ran out of filters." And we'd laugh. Just a little. Then I'd pay, take my cup, and go. It was nothing, and somehow everything. We never talked about our lives. I didn't know if he had kids, or a partner, or where he lived. I only knew that on Mondays he played jazz in the shop until 7, and on Fridays he wore a different watch, a silver one with a cracked leather band. One morning last spring, I came in a little later than usual. Around 6:40, I was groggy, underslept. I stepped inside, and the barista behind the counter was a kid I didn't recognize. Early 20s, buzz cut, nose ring. I scanned the shop. No Sam. I waited a few days, thinking maybe he was off, sick, on vacation. But he never came back. Eventually I asked. The new barista didn't look up, just said, "He passed a few weeks ago. Stroke, I think. Didn't suffer." I stood there, holding my wallet like it was suddenly heavy. I didn't cry. Not right then. Not in the coffee shop with 4 people behind me in line. But later that night, in my apartment, I sat on the edge of my couch and wept like I'd lost family. Because in a way, I had. You spend over a decade seeing someone 5 days a week, sharing small moments, trading nods, glances, tiny jokes. And even if you never go deep, never talk about your dreams or failures, they become part of your life. Sam wasn't my best friend. He didn't know I'd lost my dad in 2015. I didn't know he played the trumpet in a local band on Sundays, something I found out later from a folded-up flyer tacked to the coffee shop wall. But he made my mornings feel less heavy, less lonely. He gave me warmth when I had none. He saw me even when I didn't feel worth seeing. I tried going back to the shop a few times after that. The coffee tasted the same, the music still played, but the energy was different. Quieter, like a candle had been blown out. Eventually I stopped going. Now I brew at home. Same blend, same splash of oat milk. But sometimes when I lift the cup to my lips, I still hear his voice. Morning, Chris. It's strange, isn't it? How someone can pass through your life so gently and leave behind an entire silence. Sometimes I think we underestimate the power of small kindnesses. The people who show up quietly, day after day. No speeches, no expectations, just presence. I never got to say goodbye. Never said thank you in a way that matched what he gave me. But maybe that's okay. Maybe the gift was in the routine, in the normalcy, in the space he held without needing recognition. Sam, wherever you are, thank you for the coffee and the steadiness. And for making 11 years of mornings feel just a little less alone. Story 8. I watched my best friend marry the man I loved. We met in the way people do in their 20s by accident, through mutual friends at a rooftop party in Austin. He had a mustard-colored hoodie and a laugh that turned heads. His name was Jason. I remember thinking he was too charming, too at ease, like someone who'd never had to fumble for a punchline. I was the quieter one, always have been. The observer. The kind of person who waits 3 seconds before replying just to make sure I'm saying the right thing. But he noticed me, not in the everyone in the room fades kind of way, but in a gentle, persistent, real way. He asked me about my job, copywriting for a tech startup, and didn't look away when I told him I hated it. He asked about books, travel, my dog. That night, we stood by the railings of the rooftop for over an hour, talking about nothing and everything. We swapped numbers. And from that night forward, we talked almost every day. We were never together. That's the part that hurts most. It never officially happened. Instead, we slipped into that gray space, the late night texts, the inside jokes, the I miss you messages sent at 12:12 a.m. We watched movies on my couch. We shared fries and split the last beer in the fridge. He'd tell me when dates went badly. I'd pretend not to flinch. And then he met her, Sophia. She came to one of our mutual friends' game nights. Blonde hair, vintage leather jacket, and a kind of natural confidence that doesn't need volume. She was warm, funny, smart, and I hated how much I liked her. Jason asked me a week later if I thought she was cute. I lied and said, absolutely. And just like that, I started losing him, not in a dramatic, slamming door way, but in the subtle, inevitable way people drift when something new lights up their sky. They started dating, then moved in together, then got a dog. I smiled through every milestone, bought housewarming candles, helped pick out wedding invitation fonts. I played my role. When he proposed, I got the text seconds after she said yes. She said yes. I can't believe I get to marry her. I texted back a string of heart emojis and cried on my kitchen floor. But I didn't stop being his friend. I couldn't. He'd become part of the landscape of my life. To walk away felt like cutting off a limb. So I stayed, quietly. He asked me to be in the wedding party. Not the maid of honor that went to Sophia's sister, but a bridesmaid because, as he put it, your family. And on the day of the wedding, I curled my hair and pinned a fake smile to my lips. I watched Sophia walk down the aisle in lace and light. I watched Jason look at her the way I used to dream he'd look at me. And I clapped. I cheered. I even caught the bouquet, the irony so sharp I almost laughed out loud. The reception was beautiful. Fairy lights, soft music, champagne that tasted like secrets. People danced and toasted and held hands. At one point, Jason found me by the fire pit outside. We sat in comfortable silence. He said, "You've always been one of the most important people in my life. You know?" I nodded. "I know." He smiled, eyes glassy. "Thanks for being here." And I said, "Always." I meant it, even if it broke me a little. It's been 9 months now. We still talk. Not as often, not as easily, but enough. I'm dating someone new. He's kind, steady, thoughtful, in a way that doesn't leave me guessing. I'm trying to let go of what could have been. Because sometimes love isn't meant to be possessed. Sometimes it passes through you like a song, beautiful, fleeting, impossible to hold on to without distorting it. I love Jason, quietly, deeply, fully. But I love myself now too. And that means knowing the difference between someone who makes your heart race and someone who stays. Story 9. My dad spent 30 years teaching me how not to be like him. I used to think my dad hated me. Not in a loud, dramatic movie kind of way. No fists, no slamming doors. But in the silence, the sighs, the looks. The way he'd always be out in the garage when I needed him inside. The way he never hugged me unless it was a holiday. And even then, it was like hugging a statue. We lived in western Pennsylvania, just outside Erie. Snows 6 months out of the year. My dad worked night shifts at a steel mill for most of my childhood. Came home smelling like iron and sweat, boots heavy, voice hoarse. When I was in 3rd grade, I drew a picture of us holding hands in front of a tree. The next morning, I taped it to the fridge before school. When I got home, it was gone. No mention, no thank you, just gone. I stopped drawing after that. My mom used to say, "He just doesn't know how to show it." But that didn't make the birthdays feel any less lonely. He never hit me, never yelled. But somehow, his absence felt louder than any fight ever could. I became the quiet kid, the overthinker, the one who held his breath around men with deep voices. By high school, we barely spoke. He'd sit at the kitchen table with his black coffee, flipping through the local paper, while I made eggs or cereal. If we made eye contact, he'd nod. That was our whole interaction for the day. When I left for college, on a scholarship I earned entirely on my own, he said, "All right then," and helped me pack the car. No advice, no. "I'm proud of you." Just folded shirts and silence. I told myself I'd never turn into him. And then I had a son, Liam. Born at 3:47 a.m. after 18 hours of labor. My wife was exhausted, shaking. They handed me this tiny, squinting human, and I held him against my chest, sobbing in a way I didn't know I was capable of. And somewhere in that moment, I felt my dad. I remembered how we used to check the locks twice every night, how the heater was always working in winter, how there was never once an unpaid bill or an empty fridge, how he always stood on the side of traffic when we walked, always fixed the leaky faucets, always left the bigger slice of meatloaf for someone else. He never said he loved me, but he showed up in every quiet, invisible way a man could. A few weeks after Liam was born, I drove out to see him, alone. Just me and the hum of the road and the weight of everything I hadn't said. He was out in the yard, fixing a loose shutter. Same old flannel, same creased face. I got out of the car, walked up, and for the first time since I was a child, I hugged him. I said, "You were there, you know, all those years. You just didn't know how to say it." He didn't hug back right away, but then, slowly his arms came around me, and he whispered, "I tried, kid. I really did." We sat on the porch that evening, drinking cold beers and talking about everything but feelings, but I felt something shift. A thaw. We never became close in the traditional sense, but there was a new softness after that. He started sending Liam little wooden toys he carved, He never signed the cards, just Grandpa. When he passed away last fall, heart failure in his sleep, I found a shoebox in his closet. Inside were drawings, mine, from when I was little. The one with the tree was on top. I sat on his old bed, holding that crayon sketch, and I wept for the man I thought I hated. The man who showed love in duct tape and worn boots and quiet sacrifice. Now, when Liam crawls into my lap, I hold him close and say, I love you. Every single time. Because my dad taught me something important not by what he said, but by what he didn't. He taught me what I missed, so I could give it to my son. And maybe that's how we break the cycle. One small, gentle moment at a time. Story 10. The woman in apartment 3, B. I live in a modest, aging apartment building in Chicago. Nothing fancy. Brown brick, creaky radiators, shared laundry in the basement. You learn people's habits here without meaning to. You smell someone's dinner through the hallway vents. You hear someone's shower run at the same time, every morning. The woman in apartment 3B was different. Her name was Nora. She was in her early 80s, lived alone, and wore the same long navy coat every winter, even when it wasn't that cold. She had a gray bun that always seemed perfectly pinned, and she walked with one of those foldable floral canes. I met her my second week after moving in. I was dragging groceries up the stairs sweating, balancing a bag of rice on my shoulder when I heard a voice behind me say, "You'll throw your back out, carrying things like that." I turned around, startled, and she was standing there holding a mail key and a stack of catalogs. I offered to help her with her mail. She ignored the offer and said, "What apartment?" 4C, I said. She nodded. "You'll hear the pigeons at night. They like your fire escape." Then she disappeared into 3B. Over the next year, we developed a rhythm. I'd see her in the hallway around 7 p.m., walking slowly to the mailboxes. She always wore slippers, never shoes, and never said hello first. But if I greeted her, she'd offer a one-line commentary on the day. "Smells like too much cumin on 2A's floor tonight." Or, "That kid in 5D needs to learn piano before playing so loud." Eventually, I started offering to carry her heavier bags or bring her packages upstairs. She resisted at first, but over time, she began to accept. She never said thank you, just gave a soft nod, like a queen quietly acknowledging a loyal servant. Then last winter, she didn't come downstairs for her mail. Day 1, I thought maybe she was out or had it picked up. Day 2, I grew a little concerned. By day 3, I knocked on her door. No answer. I told the building manager. We called her emergency contact, an out-of-state niece who hadn't spoken to her in months. The fire department came, opened the door. She had passed away in her sleep. No pain, according to the EMT. A blanket still tucked under her chin. Her apartment was small, but spotless. Neatly stacked books, a cup of tea half finished, and an old black and white photo of a man in uniform on the table beside her chair. They packed up her things, quietly. The niece came 2 days later, and didn't stay long. But here's where the story doesn't end. After Nora passed, the building manager found something in her storage unit, a series of boxes, neatly labeled by year. Inside were handwritten letters, hundreds of them, all addressed, all unsent. Most were to her husband, the man in the photo. He'd died 30 years prior. Every week, she wrote to him, telling him what she'd eaten, what she'd watched, what birds were on the windowsill, what she was thinking about, what she missed. The letters were detailed, honest, mundane, and beautiful. I read a few, with the family's permission. One line still stays with me. "I think the boy upstairs is kind. He tries not to be noticed, but I notice. That's the gift of old age, seeing who people are when they think no one's watching. After the niece left, she gave me something. Nora's coat. The long navy one she always wore. Said her aunt would have wanted me to have it. I didn't know what to do with it at first. But on the first snow of March, I wore it on a walk. It was warm. Smelled faintly of lavender and mint. I stood outside our building, watching the flakes fall, and imagined her by the window, tea in hand, writing to someone she hadn't seen in 3 decades. And in that moment, I felt like she was writing to all of us. To anyone who ever felt invisible, whoever loved quietly, whoever showed up day after day without applause. Nora never made the news, never went viral, never trended, but she mattered. And sometimes, that's all any of us want to know, that in our small routines, our soft habits, our quiet kindnesses, someone noticed. I did, Nora. I noticed. If you're still awake, thank you for spending your time with us. We'd love to have you back tomorrow night, so go ahead and subscribe. Tap like if this video helped you unwind. And let us know in the comments what kind of stories help you fall asleep. Sleep well. See you in the next one.